Okay, everybody. The second story, a story from Greater Khingan Range. Today's story comes from Bai, B-A-I, a truck driver from Inner Mongolia who lives in a Khingan League area, which is also a part of the northeast region. During the coldest winter days, the temperature hovers around minus 40 degrees Celsius. And occasionally it can drop to minus 50 degrees. It is 58 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Yeah, very cold. 10 years ago, Bai was already a very experienced driver. Long-haul driving was tiring, but it paid well. And he relied on his strong physique to work more and earn more money. One December, Bai was driving his big truck from Halar. Yeah, it's a name of place. It was the coldest time of the year. As the truck passed through Arshan. Arshan is a mountain, everybody. Okay, it's a mountain. Bai felt that there must be something wrong with his truck. Probably the fuel tank was leaking. At that time, his truck happened to pass a motel, which was prepared for these long-haul drivers. Usually, the large parking lot was filled with trucks, and behind the parking lot was a row of rooms for drivers to rest and sleep. Bai was still in good spirits at the time and did not want to stay at the motel. But there was a problem with the truck, so he parked his truck not far from the motel and prepared to get out and check. It was 11:30 at night, and there was no one around. The trucks in a parking lot were also very few. After all, there were fewer long-haul drivers in this season, and even if there was an urgent task, it was all done during the day. Of course, Bai did not mind. In fact, it was better if there was no one on the road, so he could drive more smoothly. Yeah, but there was something wrong with his fuel tank. He thought he could handle it in a few minutes and continue on his way, but he failed to repair it. He needed a tool. Yeah, but he did not have one. So he went to the motel seeking for help. The motel owner helped him. Bai used to travel this road often before and had seen this motel. He had never stayed here, but from then on, whenever Bai was on this road, he would definitely stop at this motel for a while, bring some rice, flour, oil, or mountain products as gifts for the owner, because the owner helped him, and then chatted with the owner for a while. Occasionally, when it was not urgent and it got dark, the owner would definitely keep him there for the night. In the evening, the two would have a few drinks and chat. In fact, Bai and the owner, they are from the same place. But if it weren't for such an opportunity, they might never have met in their lifetimes. Once they met, the two became good friends quickly, who could talk about anything. The owner's surname is Bo, okay, B-A-O, is Bo, and his family has lived here for generations. His elders all worked in a local forest farm. He did not like that job, so his family invested some money to open this motel to accommodate truck drivers. It did allow him to meet many friends, of course. The drivers who come and go here are all from Inner Mongolia and Heilongjiang province, all working around the greater Khingan range. Yeah, let me tell you some information about this range. It's a huge mountain, actually. The greater Khingan range is an important mountain range in the northeast region of China and one of China's important forest resources. It is about 1,200 kilometers long and 200 to 300 kilometers wide. Yeah, it's very big. Yeah. The average altitude is between 1,100 and 1,400 meters. And the reason why the Greater Khingan Range is called the name is that there is also a lesser Khingan Range nearby. So there are actually two big ranges there. And its official English name is the Greater Khingan Range. Okay, the word is spelled like Khingan, Khingan Range. In the mountains and forests, there are many kinds of fish, insects, birds, beasts. Compared to them, there are far fewer people here. Perhaps a large forest farm only needs one or two people to manage it. The usual work is not busy, but you can imagine the loneliness of being the only living person within dozens of kilometers. It's really not something most people can stand, which is why Bao, the motel owner, Bao, doesn't like this job. So he opened this motel, met many people, and in the evenings, there are drivers staying here. Everyone drinks some wine, chats, tell their own stories or the stories they have heard. It's Bo's favorite thing to do. This is how Bai, the story sharer, heard this horrible story. One time, when Bai was staying here, several drivers and the owner, Bao, got together to drink. Everyone started telling stories again. Among these drivers, there was a person named Da Jun. Da is Da, Gun, Jun, Da Jun. Yeah, very common Chinese name, who spoke very little. Basically, others told stories and he listened. After one story was finished, another person continued with another story. Just after a story was finished, Bo asked, Dajun, don't just listen. Do you have any good stories to tell? Yeah, Dajun's face turned red all of a sudden. He was very shy and waved his hand, saying, Brother Bo, my mouth is clumsy and I cannot tell it well. Oh, that means there is a story, right? So everyone persuaded him to tell his own story, and finally, Dajun began to speak. Here is Dajun's story. Dajun said, This is a true encounter of my father's. Let me tell you all about it. Yeah, everyone listened carefully. Dajun began to tell his story. My surname is Li, L-I is Li. That's a very common Chinese family name. My father works on a train, not an ordinary train, but a small train in a forest farm that specially pulls timber. My hometown is located in a forest area of Greater Khingan Range. There is a lot of high-quality timber in the area, but the transportation is very troublesome. There are no roads on the mountains. Later, a special railway was built to pull timber down the mountain and then to the freight train station, which is much more convenient. In the morning, the small train pulls lumberjacks and their tools to mountains, saving a lot of time. When I was a child, I loved to ride my father's small train. My father often took me up the mountains. It was a steam train. My father was a coal tender, and Uncle Liu was the driver. My family and Uncle Liu's family were very familiar. Moreover, this job is much easier and safer compared to lumberjacks. When this incident occurred, it was winter. I was 8 years old that year. It was the time when the mountain was sealed. One reason was that the snow on the mountain was too heavy for lumberjacks to work. The other was to give the trees and animals in a forest a rest. But even though the lumberjacks no longer entered the mountains to work, there were still people on duty at the mountain forest farm. My father and Uncle Liu were naturally a group on duty together. They had to go into the mountains when they are on duty to check if there were anything wrong in their forest farms. One day, when it was their turn to be on duty, they arrived at the duty room in the morning, bought some hot water, ate some food, and drank tea, and then checked if there were any anomalies around the duty room. It was not until about 3 p.m. that they started the train up the mountains to check the forest farms. They would drive the train to the logging site, observing along the way. When they arrived at the logging site, they checked the entire site and then sign on a signature board, and they could come back. Okay, that's their job. They calculated time, leaving at 3 and they could come back at 5, just as it got dark. Yeah, this is afternoon time. Yeah. Leave at 3 p.m. and come back at 5 p.m. Just as it got dark in the evening, they could have some wine and sleep, and by the next morning, their duty would be over. So the two of them started the train's engine and went into the mountain. A few days before, a heavy snow had fallen down, and everywhere was a vast expanse of white, which would make the eyes uncomfortable after a while. Okay, also known as snow blindness. Because they started late, the train was going quite fast. Soon, the train entered the mountain and began to climb, and the speed decreased a bit, but it was still relatively fast. When they had traveled about a quarter of the way, Uncle Liu noticed something dark on the railway, which contrasted sharply with the surrounding white snow. My father saw it too, so they started honking. They both thought it was an animal lying on the railway, but that thing did not move. When the train approached it, they discovered to their horror that there was a person lying on the railway. Uncle Liu applied emergency braking immediately, but their train was going very fast and now without any freight on it, and the railway was very slippery with snow and ice. The train went straight over this person. Oh my God. Uncle Liu and my dad both let out a cry, and the small train shook a few times before finally stopping. Uncle Liu's face was pale at this time, so they got off the train nervously and saw a long trail of blood behind the train. They ran to the back of the train immediately and soon found the upper half of the body near the railway tracks. The lower half was nowhere to be found. Uncle Liu was so terrified that he collapsed on the ground. He had never seen such a scene before. My dad was not that scared. He used to be a soldier and had been to war. He comforted Uncle Liu quickly and then went to check the body. It was then that they saw the deceased was a woman, now lying face down in the snow, motionless. And she was definitely dead. But there on the mountain, on the road, there was no phone to notify the police, and there were no mobile phones at that time. So what they gonna do? Later, my dad suggested going back to the duty room to call the police. However, Uncle Liu was too weak in the legs to stand up, so he asked my dad to go back alone to call the police. And he would walk down the mountain along the railway, later when he recovered. I think they were both very panicked at that time. My dad left, and Uncle Liu stayed behind, right? But it wasn't just Uncle Liu there. There was also half of a body, too. You know, my dad ran down the mountain without wasting any time. By 4:30, he had already returned to the scene of the accident with 3 policemen. At that time, the setting sun shone on the trail of blood behind the train, making it particularly glaring. However, when the 4 of them came back, they found that Uncle Liu was not here. The woman's half body was not at the scene. At that time, my dad thought to himself, isn't Liu going to destroy or bury the body? Does he want to deceive the police? This is too stupid. The 4 of them searched the train, front and back, left and right, but did not find Uncle Liu or the body. The both of them just disappeared. The blood all over the ground proved that what my dad said was the fact. But everyone just couldn't find Uncle Liu and the half body. It was getting dark, and it gets dark very quickly in the mountains, as you know. At this time, police said, let's go back to the duty room and have a look. Maybe Liu has gone back. So they started walking down the mountain to the duty room. But suddenly, a police pointed to a big tree not far away and shouted, look! What is that? This policeman was pointing to a tree that looked different from the surrounding ones. Why was it different? Because there was very little snow on the branches and leaves of this tree. And right at the top of the tree, there was something dark over there. Everyone approached and looked again, and the thing on the tree was Uncle Liu. At this time, his mouth was wide open, his face was full of horror. Motionless on the tree, looking like he was already dead. What was even more terrifying was that on Uncle Liu's back, there was half of the female body. And the woman's hands, were tightly gripping Uncle Liu's back, motionless as well. My God. The 3 police and my dad were both, surprised and scared. So the police stayed at the scene, and my dad ran back to the duty room to call the forest farm leader. The leader dispatched the 5 lumberjacks urgently with logging tools and lighting equipment to the scene. They cut down the tree and brought the 2 bodies back to the police station. Uncle Liu was holding the tree trunk tightly at the time. And even after the tree fell, his body still clung tightly to the trunk. It was the lumberjacks who sawed through the trunk to move their bodies. Later, the forensic examination determined that Uncle Liu died of a heart attack due to extreme terror. That is, he was scared to death. And the woman was killed by a train crash. How did the woman's half-body climb onto Uncle Liu's back? What exactly happened to him after my dad left? No one knows, but it must have been something very terrible to scare him. He climbed to the top of a big tree to hide, then died there. The police suspected my dad first because he was the only person on duty with Liu, and he was the last person to see him. However, after the investigation, the possibility of my dad killing Uncle Liu was ruled out. First reason, the woman did go to commit suicide. The police found her suicide note, which contained a lot of content explaining the reasons for her suicide. After the police verified, they were all true. Number 2, the forensic doctor confirmed that Uncle Liu died of a sudden cardiac arrest due to extreme terror. That is, he was scared to death. Number 3, no one could transport Uncle Liu and half of the body to the top of a big tree. That's not possible. Number 4, there were no footprints of my dad found outside the railway, nor were there any footprints found other than Uncle Liu's. Number 5, Uncle Liu and my dad had a very good relationship. And the relationship between the two families was also very good. Uncle Liu and my dad were like brothers. When I was a child, he often bought me snacks, but I never saw him again after that day. I asked my dad where Uncle Liu was, and my dad lied to me, saying that he had left this forest farm and he was working in another one. Later, when I grew up, I drank with my dad. He was in a bad mood that day and drank a lot of wine. And then he told me the truth about Uncle Liu's death. And then he cried very hard. That's Dajun's story. The motel owner, Bao, said, that night, the story told by Dajun was the most bizarre and most terrifying. Bai also felt the same way. Many years have passed, and he still remembers this story. So, do you have any idea that what happened to Uncle Liu? After Dajun's dead, left the accident scene, what happened? Have you heard any strange things or stories that are related to mountains or forests? Okay, so please share what you think of this story and your stories. Thank you, everybody. This is Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. See you next time.